Can you tell the world you do not support
We do not
arm
support
or collaborate
the FDLR. We do not.
in any way?
They are Rwandans. They
Okay.
have been on our territory for the past 30 years. They have been preying predominantly on our population, not on the Rwandan population.
This is the journey to One Africa.
Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for having me.
So we understand talks are going on with Qatari mediation to try and reach a final agreement, a final peace agreement between the M23 and your government. Are you close to reaching that agreement? Well,
peace is always a process. I hope that we're closer than we were a few days ago, a few weeks ago, and a few months ago. It's a tedious, and I won't deny it. It's sometimes also a very difficult process, but at the same time, the Congolese government remains fully committed to obtaining a peace agreement, a final peace agreement that will also put an end to the instability and to the occupation that has been plaguing two of our major provinces. So we are doing our utmost to be close.
How soon, Your Excellency, would you say by the end of the year you think you can get this one wrapped up?
We would want it to be a matter of weeks and hopefully not months.
You'd want it, but do you think it will be?
We are doing everything we can. Of course, it takes two to tango, and the M23 has to play its part in this effort, and we hope that they continue showing up. We also hope that they show up in a more constructive manner, obviously.
When you say more constructive manner, it sounds like you're not happy with something they did. What is that?
Well, I could start with the killing of innocent civilians.
Right.
I could start with the occupation of sovereign territory with the support of Rwandan troops. I could also speak about the fact that they have continuously, despite the fact that we are in peace talks, been establishing and consolidating a parallel administration, fundamentally undermining the very rule of law they claim to be fighting for in the DRC. So these are all elements that show that there is a gap between the posturing that you have in peace talks and the reality on the ground, and especially a reality on the ground that weighs enormously on our civilian population.
Madam Foreign Minister, when I'm listening to you, when you mention those issues, killings of civilians and the setting up of parallel administrations, have those issues not been resolved yet in the peace talks? And this is what has been reported, is there is still a disagreement over a basic principle, the idea that the M23 will disband, will withdraw, and hand over territory to the government of the DRC. Is that still a contentious point?
Well, when you look, for example, at the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2773, when you look at the peace agreement that we signed with Rwanda in Washington, D.C. on June 27th, you can see that the end state that we're perpetually working towards is a full restoration of state authority. There is no scenario in which the DRC, the government of the DRC, the legitimate government of the DRC, will ever accept a prolonged presence of an occupying force that is undermining the rule of law.
And do you feel the M23 hasn't accepted that principle, despite the Doha Declaration agreement signed on July 19th?
I think it's getting there, but I think that there could be more tangible efforts also on the ground that could show us the good faith that they claim to come to the talks with.
But you're confident that the M23 will agree to that?
We are confident that we will remain on our principles. Now, what the
sure
M23 does, what the M23 does is fully its responsibility. And the
But
M23,
do you believe they are negotiating in good faith and they're committed to that principle?
I look at facts, not necessarily at beliefs. And the facts show me that they participate in the talks, that they are active in the talks, that they show up to meetings, that they sign on certain documents. The facts also show the realities on the ground that I just enumerated. So this is where we have to strike a balance. And I think this is where different partners have different partitions and different roles that they can play.
When you say, though, you look at the facts and you have to strike a balance, when you look at the facts of what's happening on the ground and you strike that balance, do you believe that this party is committed to the principle of eventually disbanding the parallel administration? Or do you have serious doubts that they're just, you know, letting time pass?
I believe that they will come to acknowledge the reality on the ground, which is one where the DRC will not tolerate them remaining where they are, occupying, but also that many other stakeholders will not tolerate that. And it is a position of increasing isolation. And so I want to believe that they are pragmatic to the sense of understanding that it is a fruitless endeavor, if you want, to remain in that posture and to remain in a posture that is one that will not be tolerated, not by the Congolese government or by the international community.
On October the 14th, the DRC and the M23 agreed to form a monitoring body to oversee a ceasefire. But there's still fighting going on, isn't there? When do you think this ceasefire is going to actually kick in?
On the side of the Congolese government, we are committed to a ceasefire. On the other hand, we are also in a posture where we have to defend our territory, in a posture where we have to make sure that the occupying forces, and when I speak of occupying forces, I'm not only talking about the M23, because we know that the M23 is accompanied and supported by the Rwandan Defense Forces. We cannot permit that the territory that they're already encroaching on can be widened.
So what is delaying all parties saying right now today, this is the ceasefire date? If you're ready, do you perceive there is a delay or a lack of willingness or desire on the part of Rwanda or the M23 to
their
commit?
Position, their posturing on the ground shows that. So when they are ready to stop fighting, we will be ready to stop fighting too.
Have you told them we want a ceasefire now and received an answer of no?
I'm not in those direct conversations, if you want, where I would confront the M23 with such a question. But our position has always been that we want to spare as many civilian lives as possible, and that a ceasefire would be necessary to do so, or would be necessary to create a more protective environment. So I believe the M23 has certainly no doubt on the posture of the Congolese government in that regard.
What has delayed the prisoner swap?
I always say you sign an agreement, but that's when the real work begins. And these are things that may not necessarily appear to the public eye or be as obvious to the public eye. Whilst this mechanism has been set in place, at the same time, there are a lot of technical steps that have to be taken into account and that have to materialize, be it on the side of the Congolese government or on the side of the M23. On our side, we're doing our utmost to prepare technically and operationally to be ready for a prisoner swap. I think,
you know the criticism, I'm sure, though, from the other side, which is that the DRC simply doesn't want to release or to swap these prisoners, that you see these people as criminals who've committed crimes. And well, is that the situation?
A prisoner swap should not be mistaken with impunity. And I think this is where the M23 may have expectations that do not fit reality. It is not because we are engaging in a logic of a prisoner swap that we are engaging in what? Impunity, full impunity for massacres, for raping, for looting. And so I think these are the core issues where the M23 may have to do some soul searching and understand a bit more what it means to be a party to a peace process that has the ambition to create lasting peace. And we have all learned, not just from the DRC's own history, but you look at our neighbors, you look beyond our neighbors, you look at so many other regions and continents. You cannot build sustainable peace on the foundation of impunity. And the M23 needs to understand that.
Was this a point that perhaps wasn't clarified sufficiently in the agreement? Because
isn't it common sense?
It
that
should
you shouldn't get away with killing?
It should be.
And you shouldn't be rewarded for killing?
Absolutely. But do you think there was perhaps the agreement was too vague in just mentioning exchanges of...
Well, you know, our posture on the matter of impunity has always been very clear. Even before the M23 renewed its rebellion, or the M23 rebellion was reignited by Rwanda, President Tshisekedi has always been very clear. We cannot build sustainable peace in eastern DRC or other parts of the DRC without justice.
Okay, so when do you think you'll be able to exchange in prisoner swaps? Are we talking weeks, months?
If it were in my hands, we would have had an agreement yesterday. So I'm not projecting myself from a perspective of just the ambition that we have as a government. I'm cognizant of the party that is opposite of us or that we're facing. Again, we would want this to happen rather in weeks and not months. It depends on the posture and on the attitude of the M23 in the talks.
And does that apply as well to the ceasefire? Do you have any idea? Can you tell our viewers in weeks or months you expect the ceasefire to be in place? Do you have any expectations?
The earlier the better, but at this point it would be difficult to, or it would be over optimistic or over ambitious, if you want, to provide a concrete date.
It sounds like many of the key issues are still way too much up in the air, are they?
Not necessarily.
I mean, the ceasefire, the prisoner swap, the dismantling of parallel administrations, it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of tangible progress.
Not necessarily. I differ there. And I think this is sometimes the difficult nature of a peace process that has to be conveyed to an audience that has high expectations. What you see in the news is that there are talks ongoing. It triggers the expectation that there will be a solution, a quick one, but at the same time, we are never in a position in peace talks to delve into so many details that we can share them to the public. So while it may seem that progress is lagging on or is not happening as quickly, it doesn't mean that the work is not happening. It doesn't mean that the efforts are not being put in, but it means that sometimes you have to create, if you want, a bit of a bubble to make sure that the minimum of, let's call it trust or trust building that you need to move ahead for a peace process is maintained.
In addition to the Doha dynamic, if we can call it that, of the talks between the DRC and the M23, you've also got the other dynamic of the talks between the DRC and the Rwandan government. There was an agreement that was signed on June 27th in Washington, D.C., and the expectation was that the two presidents, the president of Rwanda and DRC, will meet to sign a further final agreement. Any idea when that might happen?
Well, the further or the next step, if you want, of the meeting at the level of the heads of state, first of all, depends on the availability of the three heads of states. I think on the side of the DRC, on the side of the US, and I want to believe on the side of Rwanda, it's unequivocal. All parties are committed to having that meeting as soon as possible.
Why do you say you want to believe? Do you have doubts that the Rwandan party is serious?
Yes, because they still have 6,000 troops on a sovereign territory.
And you don't think
they're still looting, they're still killing, they're still maiming, and they're still raping. That is the reality. Now, does that mean that they are not committed to finding a lasting solution or to engaging in a process? Not necessarily. We want to be generous and give the benefit of the doubt that this, hopefully, is the process.
But it sounds like you're saying you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but when you look at the reality of their actions, you don't really believe the Rwandan side is serious about peace.
I trust the facilitation. I trust the facilitation. I trust the fact that for once in Eastern DRC and the Great Lakes region, we have stakeholders that are truly committed, that have levers that they're willing to activate, that have pressure points, be it on the DRC or on Rwanda or on other parties, that can hold the parties accountable.
That sounds like you're trusting in the mediators or outside actors to actually put pressure on Rwanda rather than Rwanda's serious commitment to peace. Have I understood you correctly?
This is not the first agreement we're signing in the Great Lakes region. And when you look at why so many others faltered, then it was because of a lack of accountability. And I think this is where the commitment and the engagement of the US and of Qatar are playing a much bigger role than has been the case in the past. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we are coming from 30 years of conflict. On the side of the DRC, over the 30 years, we have had different governments, we have had different presidents. On the side of Rwanda, it has been a full continuity.
Do you still believe then what some DRC officials have been talking about, that the Rwandan side simply wants to break the eastern part of the DRC up or break it away? That is their real goal. It's not to reach a peace agreement that would see the dismantling of M23 and these groups. Do you still believe that, or is your opinion of the Rwandan position now different, having engaged in further talks?
I don't want to speculate about what Rwanda wants and Rwanda doesn't want.
Well, your officials have already said that. They said they believe Rwanda wants to break the eastern side of the DRC. Is that still...
believing, what comes above believing is knowing. And what we know is that our territory will remain whole. Our territory will not be undermined, despite the efforts or attempts that may come from any side.
But do you know the Rwandans don't want to break off the eastern part of the DRC?
I think the past years have given us ample evidence and ample examples that could lead us to believe that it is the case.
Madam, how can you go into serious talks with another party if you believe they're actually just wasting your time with these talks? They want to break up your country. That's why, forgive me for drilling down on this, but this is what I'm trying to understand. When you go into talks and you have DRC officials who say, we know or we think the other side just wants to break our country up, doesn't that really dent your confidence in the whole point of talks?
Not necessarily, because we also know that the other party fully depends on international aid. We know that the other party would not be existing if it hadn't been propped up by so many countries over the past decades. And this is why it's important to have this discussion at a higher level. It's not just a discussion at a bilateral level. It's not an issue just between the DRC and Rwanda. It's an issue about international law.
You've spoken about the grievances which the DRC feels towards the Rwandan side. Let me present to you the alternative narrative. During that June peace agreement or agreement that was signed in Washington between the Rwandan and the DRC teams, the statement was made from the Rwandan side, from the Rwandan Foreign Minister, calling for what they said was a verifiable end to the DRC's support of the group known as the FDLR. Can you tell the world you do not support,
we do not support
or collaborate
the FDLR. We do not.
In any way?
They are Rwandans.
Okay.
They have been on our territory for the past 30 years. They have been preying predominantly on our population, not on the Rwandan population.
Madam Foreign Minister, why then do you think there have been several international human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch in December, going all the way back even 2009, that have spoken about the support of the DRC government for the FDLR, saying they have been either allies or enemies of the Congolese government, depending on its relationship with Rwanda? So I'm wondering, how do you respond to that accusation? It's long-standing that the DRC basically uses the FDLR as some kind of pressure tool, depending on the status of its relationship with Rwanda. Is that a fair assessment?
It isn't. You're talking about 2009, and we're in 2025.
But what about the Security Council resolution? That was in 2025, 2773, when in point 6 it said, it, quote, condemns support provided by DRC military forces to specific armed groups, in particular the FDLR, and calls for the cessation of such support. Were they wrong as well?
Well, if there are cases of support to the FDLR, and I think this is the important distinction we need to make, it is not state policy. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about individuals within the army, and when we have evidence of that, we also have mechanisms to hold them accountable and to sanction them. On the flip side, when you look at the presence of the Rwandan army, that sends over 6,000 troops into the DRC, we're not talking about random individuals who are not behaving. We're not talking about a few military that find themselves in a foreign country and decide to do whatever they want. And so the question is, when you have 6,000 Rwandan troops on our territory, is that not state policy?
But why then do you think the Security Council would call on the Congolese military rather than on random elements within it? Have they really, Security Council members, misunderstood the situation? Is that your message to viewers?
Because these random members are still part of the army. And so the army is held accountable, and is held accountable to make sure that any behavior that is not in line with its policy is sanctioned.
But when your own military had to issue a communique on the 10th of October 2025, calling upon its soldiers not to collaborate with the FDLR, why would the military have to do that? Why would it even have to...
Precisely to foreshadow
let me just finish
sanctioning.
the point, madam. Well, why would it need to even threaten sanctions if these were, in your words, just random minor elements? This must be quite a rampant, prevalent problem, right?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, the fact that you are explicit about something not being tolerated does not necessarily indicate the extent of the problem. The fact that you mention a problem does not mean that it is a problem of a certain magnitude. The issue that is clear here is that we clearly communicate to the public and to our army that any discretion will not be tolerated. Again, have we seen anything of the sort come from Rwanda? Maybe to the 6,000 troops that are still in DRC? Do not go into a territory that is not yours. Do not rape, do not loot. Do not take minerals, do not kill, do not seize land. We have not seen any institutional reaction on this side of Rwanda for its blatant violation of our territorial integrity and for its blatant occupation of our territory.
In that same communique, the Congolese military called on the FDLR to surrender, either to the DRC military or to the UN forces. Has there been any surrendering process underway?
Yes, because when it comes to surrenders, for example, the United Nations peacekeeping mission has a permanent process, if you want, to disarm ex-combatants who wish to disarm, including foreign ex-combatants. So this has never been suspended. It has always been ongoing.
But is it picking up steam to a point where you could say to viewers, you think that within weeks, months, the FDLR will be disbanded? Can you say that?
It's part of the process, of the Washington process and the agreement that we signed with Rwanda in Washington. We are seeing on the ground that there has been an increase in sensitization work. You mentioned the press release that has been issued by the armed forces. At the same time, in areas that we control, we do our utmost, again, to sensitize communities and to call on FDLR to surrender and to go back home. And we're doing our utmost in the areas that are under our control to continue the work at different levels to sensitize them to surrender and to go back home.
Do you think Rwanda is still supporting the M23 at the same level, despite the UN Security Council resolution that we've been discussing?
I think Rwanda's position towards the UN Security Council resolution and other declarations from the UN has been very clear. It's been a defiant one. So we are aware of the fact that there are still Rwandan troops. There is still equipment being provided. Now, the extent that may vary.
Provided to the M23 by the Rwandan government. So you haven't seen a change in their posture towards the M23?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. On June the 16th, 2025, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, he was reporting to the Human Rights Council, and he said his office was investigating alleged summary executions, arbitrary arrests, and forced disappearances committed by the DRC military. Has the DRC military committed those crimes?
If they have, then they will have to answer, the individuals who have will have to answer to the military justice.
Have you been in touch with the UN?
Yes, of course.
To say, give us the evidence, we'll look into this, we'll work with you?
Not only that, I will take it further. In February, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution calling for the establishment of an independent verification commission that would come to document and report on massive human rights violations in the areas where the conflict has been the most intense over the past years. We do not believe that this is going to be a one-sided effort. We think that the United Nations will have to look at everything that has happened. And
to be fair to the UN, they have spoken about abuses committed by the M23, and so have several international human rights organizations. So there's been a lot of criticism on the other side as well.
We have been continuously in a constructive dialogue with the United Nations on this matter. So we have no worry whatsoever about the presence of such an independent inquiry commission to establish facts on human rights violations. And we will take our share of the responsibility. We will make sure that we put in place the mechanisms that are necessary to provide justice for those who have been wronged. Now, This verification or this independent commission was to be preceded by a verification team that conducted visits in Eastern DRC. But for your information, the M23 refused them access in the areas they occupied.
Okay, but if you're happy to work with investigators, I think if I boil down what you're saying, why then have we have reports by some of the international human rights organizations like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch. They've documented what they say are atrocities by the M23, but also by the Congolese forces. Amnesty, August 20th, talking about rapes committed by soldiers, Congolese soldiers, before the fall of Bukavu. Human Rights Watch, September 15th, talking about Congolese soldiers opening fire and killing unarmed protesters. But perhaps one of the concerning points is Amnesty says on July 18th it requested information from the Congolese military but got no response. Why would you not work with them?
Well, I mean, this is something I would have to cross-check on, specifically in this particular case. But again, as I said, especially when it comes to the United Nations, which is our natural, if you want, or our more permanent interlocutor, we are in a constructive dialogue. We are in a constructive dialogue, which means that sometimes we also are willing to listen to truths that may be difficult to digest, but also that we are able and confident about reaching out to the United Nations to work together on certain issues and to see how they can be redressed. So I think this is the critical aspect about being in a constructive dialogue. Our capacity to still absorb the criticism, to evaluate it in a critical manner, also a self-critical manner, and also to take the steps to redress issues, be it through sanctions. And there have been sanctions. It is not as if things happened in a vacuum of complete impunity. There have been sanctions, but also to take measures for greater prevention. And in that regard, there have also been sustained efforts, and we continue to make those efforts, including with international partners such as the UN, that train our troops, that train our police, our investigators, to make sure that we have a more robust architecture that enables us to prevent or to react when there are violations.
Thank you.
This is the journey to one Africa.